The secret behind the masks. The old Victorian house stood at the end of Maple Street like a forgotten memory. Its weathered blue shutters hung slightly crooked, and paint peeled from the wraparound porch in gentle curls. Inside, Margaret Chen moved through rooms that felt too large, too quiet, filled with echoes of laughter that no longer came. 3 months had passed since Harold's funeral. 3 months of eating dinner alone at a table set for two out of habit. 3 months of talking to his empty chair about the weather, the neighbors, the small happenings of each day that seemed to matter less and less. Margaret was 6. With silver hair she kept in a neat bun and hands that remembered decades of caring for others. She had been Harold's wife for 42 years, a kindergarten teacher for 35, and now, she wasn't quite sure what she was anymore. The autumn rain drummed steadily against her kitchen window as she washed her single dinner plate. Outside, the streetlights cast long shadows across the wet pavement, and she found herself watching for signs of life in the neighborhood that had grown quiet over the years. Young families had moved away, old friends had passed on. The street, that once bustled with children, now felt as empty as her house. That's when she saw them, 3 small figures huddled beneath the broken streetlight at the corner. At first, she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her, but as she peered closer through the rain-streaked glass, she could make out their shapes more clearly. Children, 3 children standing in the rain, completely still. Margaret dried her hands on her apron and moved to the front window for a better view. The children hadn't moved. They stood there like little statues, rain soaking through what appeared to be thin clothing. Something wasn't right. She grabbed her umbrella and stepped onto the porch. "Hello," she called out. "Are you children all right?" The 3 figures turned toward her voice, and Margaret's breath caught in her throat. They were wearing masks. Not Halloween masks or costume masks, but simple cloth coverings that hid their faces completely. 2 taller children flanked a smaller one in the middle, and they moved with a strange, careful precision that made Margaret's teacher instincts kick in immediately. "Are you lost?" she asked, stepping closer despite the rain. "Do you need help?" The tallest child, who couldn't have been more than 12, nodded slowly. The gesture was hesitant, uncertain, as if they weren't sure whether it was safe to respond. Margaret's heart clenched. In all her years of teaching, she had developed a sixth sense about children in trouble. These 3 were definitely in trouble. "Come inside where it's warm," she said gently. "We'll figure this out together." The children exchanged glances, or at least, she assumed they did behind their masks. After a long moment, the tall one took the smallest child's hand, and all 3 began walking toward her porch with slow, measured steps. As they came closer, Margaret could see more details. The tallest was a girl, probably 11 or 12, with dark hair escaping from beneath her hood. The middle child appeared to be a boy, perhaps 9 or 10, and the smallest couldn't have been more than 5 or 6, with tiny hands that clutched a worn stuffed animal to their chest. Come in, Margaret urged, holding the door wide. "You must be freezing." The children filed into her hallway, dripping rainwater onto the hardwood floor. They stood perfectly still, waiting, as if they weren't sure what was expected of them. "Let me get you some towels," Margaret said, "and we should get you out of those wet clothes. Do you have anywhere to go? Anyone looking for you?" The oldest girl shook her head slowly. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was barely above a whisper. "No, ma'am, we don't have anywhere." Margaret's teaching experience kicked in fully now. She had dealt with difficult situations before, children from troubled homes, kids who showed up to school hungry or afraid. But something about these 3 felt different, more fragile, more desperate. "All right," she said calmly. "First things first. Let's get you warm and dry. Then we'll talk." She gathered towels from the linen closet and showed them to the guest bathroom. "You can take turns cleaning up," she said. "I'll find some clothes that might fit you." While they took turns washing up, Margaret rummaged through boxes in her spare room. She and Harold had never had children of their own, but she had always kept a supply of extra clothes at school for emergencies. Some of those boxes had made their way home when she retired. When the children emerged from the bathroom, they were still wearing their masks. The cloth coverings were damp now, but still firmly in place. Margaret had found clothes that more or less fit each of them: a sweater and jeans for the oldest girl, a warm shirt and pants for the boy, and a soft dress with leggings for the smallest child. "There," she said, trying to keep her voice light and normal. "Much better. Now, let's see about some hot chocolate." In the kitchen, she busied herself with milk and cocoa powder while the children sat quietly at her table. They moved carefully, as if they were afraid of breaking something or making too much noise. The youngest one kept the stuffed animal, a small worn teddy bear, clutched tightly in their arms. "What are your names?" Margaret asked as she stirred the hot chocolate. "I'm Sarah," said the oldest girl. "This is David." She gestured to the boy. "And this is ... She paused, looking at the smallest child. "This is Charlie." Margaret noticed the hesitation but didn't comment on it. She poured 3 mugs of hot chocolate and set them on the table, along with a plate of cookies she had baked earlier that week. "Well, Sarah, David, and Charlie," she said, settling into her own chair. "I'm Margaret, Mrs. Chen, and I think we need to talk about what's happening here." The children drank their hot chocolate in small, careful sips. Margaret waited patiently. In her teaching years, she had learned that rushing children never worked. You had to give them time and space to feel safe. Finally, Sarah spoke. "We ran away," she said quietly, "from the group home. They were going to separate us." Margaret nodded. This explained some things: the careful way they moved, the masks, the fear in their voices. "How long have you been on your own?" 4 days, David said. It was the first time he had spoken, and his voice was hoarse, tired. "We've been sleeping in doorways and under bridges. We don't want to be separated. We're family," Sarah added fiercely. "The only family we have left. They don't understand." That Margaret's heart broke a little more. She looked at the 3 masked children sitting at her table, and she saw herself in them, somehow lost, alone, trying to hold on to the only connections they had left. "The masks," she said gently. "Can you tell me about those?" The children exchanged those hidden glances again. Sarah's hands went protectively to her face. "We have to wear them," she said. "People stare otherwise. They treat us differently." Margaret waited. There was more to this story. "We were in a fire," David said suddenly, his voice barely audible. "At our first foster home. The house burned down. We got hurt. The scars," Sarah whispered. "People look at us like we're monsters." Margaret felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. These children had been through so much: losing their parents, being placed in foster care, surviving a fire, dealing with injuries and the reactions of others. No wonder they hid behind masks. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "That must have been terrifying." "Charlie got hurt the worst," Sarah said, her voice breaking slightly. "The doctors said. They said the damage might affect how Charlie talks, how Charlie develops. The group home said Charlie needed special care, different from me and David." Margaret looked at little Charlie, who had been silent through the entire conversation. The child sat perfectly still, the teddy bear held close, watching Margaret with eyes that seemed far too old and wise for such a small face. "Is that why you ran away?" Margaret asked. "To stay together." Sarah nodded. "We promised we'd never leave each other. We're all we have." Margaret sat quietly for a moment, thinking. Outside, the rain continued to fall, and the house felt warmer and more alive than it had in months. These children needed help, real help, not just a hot meal and a dry place to sleep. But looking at them, she realized something else. She needed them too. "Charlie," she said gently, addressing the smallest child directly for the first time. "Would you like to tell me anything?" Charlie looked at Sarah, then at David, then back at Margaret. Slowly, very slowly, the small hands reached up and began to untie the mask. "Charlie, no," Sarah said quickly. "People don't understand," but Charlie was already pulling the cloth away. Margaret had prepared herself for scars, for burns, for the kind of damage that might make people stare or turn away. Instead, she found herself looking into the face of a beautiful little girl with soft brown eyes and a small, sweet smile. "Hello, Mrs. Margaret," Charlie said in a clear, bright voice. "My name is Charlotte, but I like Charlie better." Margaret blinked in confusion. "I don't understand." "Sarah said you were hurt in the fire, that people stared." Sarah and David pulled off their masks as well, revealing faces that were completely unmarked. No scars, no burns, no disfigurement at all. They were just 3 ordinary children with worried expressions. "We lied," Sarah said quietly. "Not about the fire, that was real, but we didn't get hurt. At least, not on our faces." "Then why the masks?" Margaret asked gently. David looked at his feet. "Because when people see Charlie, they ask questions. Questions we don't know how to answer." "What kind of questions?" Charlotte stood up on her chair and leaned across the table toward Margaret, her eyes bright and serious. "They ask why I know things I shouldn't know," she said in her clear little voice. "Like when Mrs. Patterson at the group home was going to get a phone call about her sick mother before the phone rang. Or when I told David not to go down the south hallway because Mr. Jenkins was in a bad mood, even though Mr. Jenkins wasn't supposed to work that day." Margaret stared at the little girl. You see things before they happen. Charlotte nodded matter-of-factly. Sometimes, not always. And sometimes I just know things about people, like. She tilted her head, studying Margaret's face. Like you miss your husband Harold very much, and you've been talking to his empty chair at dinner, and you have a box of his sweaters upstairs that you smell sometimes when you miss him too much to sleep. Margaret's breath caught in her throat. She had never told anyone about the sweaters, about talking to Harold's chair. How could this child possibly know? People get scared when Charlie does that, Sarah explained. They think it's weird or wrong. Some of the adults at the group home said Charlie might be possessed or making things up for attention. But I'm not making it up, Charlotte said earnestly. I just see things, feel things, know things. Like right now, I know you've been very lonely, and your house has been too quiet, and you've been wondering what you're supposed to do next, now that Mr. Harold is gone. Margaret felt tears sliding down her cheeks. This little girl, this strange, wonderful little girl had seen right into her heart. And I know, Charlotte continued, climbing down from her chair and walking around the table to stand beside Margaret, that you need us just as much as we need you. Margaret looked down at the small, serious face, gazing up at her. What are you saying, sweetheart? I'm saying, Charlotte said, taking Margaret's hand in both of her small ones, that we could be a family. All of us together, Sarah and David and me and you. We could fill up all the empty spaces in this big house and make it feel like home again. Margaret looked at Sarah and David, who were watching her with hope and fear warring in their expressions. The authorities will be looking for you, Margaret said slowly. The group home will have reported you missing. I know, Sarah said, but maybe if we had an adult who wanted to take care of us, who understood about Charlie's gift, maybe they'd let us stay together. Margaret thought about the empty rooms upstairs, about the silent dinners and the conversations with Harold's chair. She thought about her years of teaching, of caring for other people's children, and always wondering what it would be like to have her own family to come home to. Charlotte, she said softly, what do you see when you look at our future? The little girl closed her eyes for a moment, her face peaceful and concentrated. When she opened them again, she was smiling the biggest smile Margaret had seen yet. I see Sunday morning pancakes and homework at the kitchen table. I see David learning to play the piano that's been sitting silent in your living room. I see Sarah helping you plant flowers in the spring. I see birthday parties and Christmas mornings, and you teaching us to make Harold's favorite cookies. Charlotte's grip on Margaret's hand tightened, and I see you not being lonely anymore. I see you remembering how to laugh. Margaret looked around her kitchen at the three children who had appeared in the rain like an answer to prayers she hadn't known she was praying. At Sarah, who was trying so hard to hold her little family together. At David, who needed patient guidance and gentle encouragement. At Charlotte, whose extraordinary gift was just one more wonderful thing about her. Well then, Margaret said, her voice thick with emotion but steady with determination. I suppose we'd better call social services tomorrow and see about making this official. The children erupted in smiles and tears and hugs. Charlotte threw her arms around Margaret's neck, and for the first time in months, Margaret felt the house filling up with warmth and noise and life. As she held the little girl close, Margaret whispered, "Thank you, sweetheart. Thank you for seeing what we could be." Outside, the rain had stopped, and moonlight was beginning to break through the clouds. Inside the old Victorian house on Maple Street, a new family was being born from loneliness and love, and the remarkable gift of a child who could see the future with perfect clarity. They would face challenges, Margaret knew. Questions from social workers, paperwork, adjustments, and the daily work of building a life together. But Charlotte had seen it all, and Charlotte had seen it working. And Margaret, for the first time since Harold's death, felt ready to believe in tomorrow.